So it's 7 o'clock on August 28th, and we are here to hold a meeting of the Norfolk Board of Health. And the first appointment on the list tonight is Officer Michelle Palladini, who is here to talk about vaping, juuling.
You got it.
Michelle.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. This is a timely topic because we are starting school, as everybody knows. Most of our upper middle school and high school begin next week. And what we have seen in recent years, going back about 3 years now, we have seen a huge uptick in electronic cigarette usage amongst our youth. So the purpose of my presentation here tonight is really to have a conversation about what this means for our kids and really kind of educate the community, educate the Board of Health, so that we can kind of come to a collaborative, some goals and some things that we can look at, as a community to prevent this with our youth. If you look on YouTube and you type in vaping or you type in juuling, you're going to find a series of videos, hundreds, and everything is positive. So if our kids are going onto YouTube and typing in vaping or typing in juuling, and we'll get into kind of the jargon momentarily, they're going to find hundreds of videos that really glamorize vaping. So if we look back into, kind of the days of big tobacco and how tobacco was advertised, it was marketed in a way that made it enticing. It was cool. It was neat. You looked better if you smoked. And we're seeing the same trend now, but with the advent of technology, now we're seeing kind of an upcropping of young people using these devices. So if you just look at it from a message standpoint, the kids are getting the message that it's common, it's fun, it's cool to do, and kind of what are the impacts on health, which is kind of the purpose of why we're here today. So everybody is pretty familiar with what vaping is. Here's a quick picture here of somebody vaping. They are electronic cigarettes, as most people are aware. They are inhaling actually aerosol. So that's kind of like how they're utilized. Now we're seeing a lot of different types of devices. These are the more, I guess kind of, I want to say they're antiquated, but we still see them around. They hold the liquid. They have a cartridge with a reservoir that holds the liquid solution. Now that liquid solution can be several different things, and we're going to get into what people can actually put into these devices. It has a heating element, so the atomizer is essentially what heats it up. Has a power source, and then they inhale it just through a mouthpiece. Now, for adults, we can say to each their own. But for youth, and with my position as a school resource officer, I am highly, highly concerned at the prevalence that we're seeing this, the rate that we're seeing this, and kind of what we're going to do about it from here. Juuling kind of came on the scene fiercely last year. And it's interesting, I actually found an article in the New York Times that was posted yesterday. It was titled, "Did Juul Lure Teenagers and Get Customers for Life?" It's a very interesting article. I would definitely encourage everybody to check it out. But essentially, the FDA is actually investigating whether the Juul company, Juul, has intentionally marketed this to youth. And if you look at what the Juul looks like, it looks like a flash drive. It's these tiny, and trust me, as a school resource officer, I have seen many of them in my time at the middle school. So they're very easy to conceal. If you look at the things that teenagers are vaping, if you kind of look at this graphic, now this was from 2015. We're still kind of waiting for some better statistics to come out today, but I do have some real-time data that I actually collected today that I think will be very helpful. But if you look at it, most of our children are utilizing just the flavoring. And I like the word just flavoring because that's what they think it is. It's just flavoring. There's no harm. So we're going to get into kind of what's in that flavoring. And I want to kind of plant the seed right now that This is what we are dealing with in schools. We are dealing with the increasing in frequency, the fact that they're very easy to utilize in schools. Actually, for visual effect, I should have brought one in and shown you how easily it can be, concealed in somebody's hand. So children are doing this in class. They're doing it in bathrooms. And not only have I experienced that myself as well as my school resource counterpart at the high school, but that is universal across Massachusetts in networking with other school resource officers. The actual Juul device or e-cigarette or vaping device produces very little smoke. So again, very easy to conceal. It has a fruity smell, a flavoring smell. And again, we kind of look at that as it makes it kid friendly. And I think that's where a lot of the pushback has been for a lot of these companies, with Juul in particular, that they have, these flavors that are, creme brulee and mango and citrus. And Juul, is kind of coming back and pushing back a little bit on that and stating, well, we're going to change the names of our flavors to make them less appealing to children. I don't know how you do that, but I guess they're figuring out a way to do that. We're seeing students being suspended. And so if we really want to kind of expand and broaden the impact, we can talk about, we're talking frequently about school to prison pipeline, right? And like what types of behaviors are happening in schools that are essentially being not necessarily criminalized, but they're penalizing kids for things that are more or less trivial, right? But big impact. So we're really looking at that and saying, geez, now we've got kids being suspended for something that is so common. Now that's going on their record, and kind of what happens from there. You're suspended once, you're suspended twice. So we really want to be looking at that too. And I can say for a fact that I know of, we have had children suspended in the middle school for possessing these devices. It's in the handbook. The students have to sign the handbook at the beginning of every year, as do the parents, that they've read it, that they understand it, and it's still happening. Middle school, not as much as high school, but we are seeing it in the middle school, and we are having suspensions. So with that said, I also put on here that our principals have become bathroom monitors. They have been literally camping out in the bathrooms, like trying to catch kids to try and mitigate some of the problem with this. So you look at the time spent that's taken away from education, it's a huge problem. So that's just kind of one piece of it, never mind all the health ramifications. If you look at what is in this vapor, a lot of times kids will say, well, it's just, this liquid, it's just vapor. Our bodies are not meant to inhale vapor, okay? Water vapor is not good for our lungs. And if you look at what's in the aerosol, there are a number of chemicals, most of which I can't even pronounce because that's not my background, but suffice it to say there's a number of chemicals in there. And the way I explain it to children is that anything you're inhaling into your lungs is going to be harmful, right? So no matter kind of what it is. Breaking it down, the e-liquid, or also called the e-juice, this is kind of what it looks like. It's in these different colored bottles and things like that. And if you look at even the way it's packaged and marketed, look at, one of them is like tiger's blood and has a picture of a tiger on it. Perhaps a self-respecting adult would choose to smoke tiger blood, but I don't know. To me, that seems like something that, a child would be very interested in checking out. It's cartoon looking and things like that. And we're seeing this with marijuana products as well. So what we know that's in the e-liquid are things like vegetable oil. Well, vegetable oil is not meant to be inhaled. It's safe for consumption, right, orally, but it's not safe to be smoking. Antifreeze, food products that can be eaten but aren't supposed to be inhaled are in these. So, for instance, extracts like a mango extract or a citrus extract for the flavoring. Again, we're not supposed to be inhaling that. There's so many flavors. They're sold online. The other place we're seeing them is that you kind of got these mom and pop shops that are creating this e-liquid, just in somebody's basement. And so they're not regulated. At least with our tobacco products, like a pack of Marlboro cigarettes, we know that they have to meet certain regulations. With these liquids, they're just kind of popping up. The other thing that we don't know is that oftentimes they don't have these labels on them. So our children are receiving them and they don't know what's in them. They're not labeled and they're not regulated. So we have a child who may get the liquid from an older brother, say. The older brother got it from somebody that he knew in school, and that person got it from somewhere else. So it's probably past the hand of 6 different people before it trickles down to like our little Norfolk 12-year-old, right? So what is in that? And that's what we have to be concerned about too, not just the chemicals, but even from a safety standpoint, we don't know what's in this. We know that there's nicotine, right? So let me go back one. So here's our e-liquid, e-juice that we can say has no nicotine in it, but it has a whole slew of other chemicals. Now we can look at nicotine. So we know that each Juul pod, and I kind of highlighted this here, contains the amount of nicotine equivalent to 1 pack of cigarettes or 200 puffs, and that's in 1 Juul pod. Now our children, again, if they're putting, this liquid into the cartridges, are they certain that it's not nicotine? They don't know. And if you ask them that question, well, my friend told me it wasn't. Well, right, that's not good enough. Marijuana. I bring this up because we have seen it in this area. Our kids are learning easy ways to extract the marijuana, the THC from the marijuana plant. It is as simple as taking a hair straightener and putting wax paper on it and pressing the marijuana leaf into the hair straightener. It heats up, it turns into a liquid. It's a little bit labor intensive, but kids are creative and they have a lot of time on their hands. That liquid can then be placed into a vaping device. Not only that, if you don't want to go to those links and, kind of make your own, you can buy them. So it is sold, THC products, and we have seen this kind of come on the scene around this area. So we have to really look at, what is being put in these vaping devices. Is it hash oil? Is it some type of THC product or wax from the marijuana? And the kids are getting pretty creative with it too. We have seen kids even try putting alcohol into the vaping devices. That doesn't work so well, but they do try it. So again, just things to be aware of. Now, if we look at the health hazards, the biggest things that we're seeing, not only the impact on the developing brain, right? We know that tobacco, we know that chemicals, anything that we know is being ingested for a child's brain that we know now doesn't develop until age 25. Most of our kids that are trying this are between the ages of 12 and 21. We know the propensity for addiction is there. And we know, do we want to look at this as a gateway? I look at everything as a gateway, from smoking to alcohol. I often get a lot of pushback on that, but no kids just start using hard drugs. They always start with something small. So we're kind of promoting and enticing kids to use these types of devices as something that's a little bit taboo, a little bit risky, and I worry that it can lead to bigger and harder things. So that concerns me. Where do they get them? How much do they cost? Well, a simple Google search will pull up a smoke shop right up the street in Franklin. There have been convenience stores that sell the little liquids. They can also buy them online. And quite honestly, most of our kids are saying that they got them online or things like that, or convenience stores. They're just grabbing them anywhere they can, and they're getting, again, the trickle-down effect. They're usually getting them from either older kids, siblings, and things like that. But again, it's passed so many hands. So where are they really getting them? We don't know. And how do we kind of stop, at least control what we can control in our community to kind of stop the impact? What I want to share with you all is a little bit of real-time data. So what I did this afternoon, because I have a lot of time on my hands, is I put together a Survey Monkey, and I asked parents in the community to respond. And I had over 100 respondents, but I don't have a paid Survey Monkey account, so it shut me off at 100 respondents. But here's the data from 100 respondents. If I have time, would it be okay to share some of this?
Go ahead.
Okay. So my first question was, do you believe vaping, juuling, e-cigarettes are a problem for young people in our community, Rentham, Norfolk, Plainville, so the KP community? 70% of parents said yes, they know it's a problem in our community. I had 8% of parents say it's already been a problem in their household. 16% of parents said they know it's a public health issue. 3% didn't know much about it. 2% said that kids will be kids, they'll always push the limits. And 1% hadn't even heard of kids using e-cigarettes. So that's the first question. The second question was, at what age do you know or are hearing the kids in our area are using these smoking devices? Elementary school was only 1%, and that is accurate. Our elementary schools have not had any instances of elementary school age children up through 6th grade using vaping devices. Our middle school, 59%. So we're looking at middle school students who are ages 12 to 14 that parents know are using. High school, 20%, and both middle and high school, 20% of respondents said that. So you can see middle school very, very high. Are parents aware of the health hazards that electronic cigarettes present? Luckily, 96% of our parents recognize the health hazards. Do you feel you know how to talk to your children about electronic cigarettes? 52% said yes, 39% said somewhat, 9% said no. And we are actively doing education for the last couple years in our schools, and we'll be doing a lot more this year as well. Do you think vaping presents an issue for schools? 34% of the respondents said absolutely, it's happening all the time. 26% said yes, I'm sure it is happening because it's smokeless and easy to conceal. And 39% said both, it's happening and because it's smokeless and easy to conceal. Question 6, why is vaping and juuling so appealing to young people? It's easy to conceal, 10%. It's risky behavior that teens can engage in that isn't a, quote, huge risk, 13%. 3% of parents said they like to do tricks with it, for example, smoke rings. And 65% of parents said all of the above. So, and that's real. Talking with the kids, that's really what it's about. They're just kind of curious. They want to do the tricks. Again, go on YouTube. I encourage everybody to try it and type in vaping, type in juuling. You will just find every video is positive. There's nothing that talks about the danger. All it does is glamorize it and make it look, very exciting for children to try. Where do children get vaping devices? And kind of a resounding percentage said that older friends and classmates, siblings stealing from their parents. Yes, we have seen that happen. Purchasing at stores with no ID or a fake ID, ordering online. And 29% said they didn't know. So 29% of our parents don't know where their children are getting this. And our children, particularly with the internet, a lot of kids have online accounts. Parents have Amazon accounts. You go right on, you order it, eBay, places like that. Our kids are buying it. Do you know that you can smoke tobacco, marijuana, and chemical liquid with a vaping device? And luckily, 83% of our parents said that they realized that. 17% did not. Question 9. Did you know the tobacco product age was just raised to 21, which includes vaping devices? And we were pretty split on that. 54% said yes, 46% said no. And finally, I did an open response so that parents could share some feedback. And I'm just going to give you a couple highlights if we're doing okay on time. Yes? Okay. Some parents said, it is everywhere. We have so much conversation about how bad it is, but it still happened. Kids that you would never expect are doing it. The marketing and ease of hiding is such an issue. The bus and the bathrooms at school. I'd like to give my daughter tips on how to get away from the vapors and maybe something to say. Big problem, only getting worse. My children are convinced it's harmless. I tried to educate them, but they think I'm overreacting. Mom, it's just water vapor. Relax. I feel I'm more knowledgeable about vaping than some of my counterparts. I've been lucky enough to attend presentations at the schools this past spring. Kids are seen vaping multiple times in classrooms and bathrooms. I'm concerned that the kids don't appreciate the health risks associated with vaping because they think it's a healthier alternative to smoking. And we know that it is not. I think the candy and fruit flavors are targeting young people. They do it in the bathrooms and locker rooms all the time. It's happening on the bus, in the locker rooms, in parking lots, in the classrooms, and in the bathrooms. It's a huge problem for all involved. We have a child at the high school, and it's a major issue. Kids vape everywhere, including during class. And this kind of goes on. and on and on. It's harder to control than cigarettes, but I'm hearing vaping inside the schools. Parents of older children talk about their children vaping. It makes me nervous because I know nothing about the long-term effects. And I think that goes for a lot of us. I am not a physician. I try and read the studies that are out there, and we still don't know enough, and that concerns me as well. I heard at the high school, kids do it in class. Kids vape in high school in class, never mind the bathrooms. With the data on the dangers being so new, it's hard to convey it effectively to an age group that's always looking to be a little risky. Really, really liked that comment. I sent my son off to a driver's ed class one weekend in Norfolk, and he came back from it a nicotine addict. We tried everything from taking it away whenever we found him on it, punishing him, even didn't allow him to get his driver's license until he turned 18. He's now a senior in college and hasn't been able to quit. So there's, again, this, I could just continue reading this. I got about 45 responses to this, and they all basically say the same thing. My high schooler was using it a lot at home and things like that. So I think to close, hopefully that gives everybody just a better idea about what vaping is, how it affects the body. I would definitely love to see more studies and maybe somebody with a better medical background than I, kind of explain the risk, but suffice it to say, this is, from my lens of experience, this is the impact it's having on our kids. I care very deeply about the health and the wellness of our kids on all fronts, and this is just something that I believe is a gateway to leading to riskier behaviors, and I take that very personally. Any questions?
Well, actually, are any folks here to discuss this issue?
Yes.
Do you want to say something? Identify who you are and then
There's a mic.
Do you need me to sign in?
No,
just speak into the microphone and we'll have a record of you.
Okay. Thank you. I've been here before, and my name's Dennis Lane, Coalition for Responsible Retailing. I travel around the state and meet with boards of health, selectmen, mayor's offices, town councils, city councils, and there's no doubt that juuling and vaping, especially in the schools, is an incredibly, it's in the news, it's a very emotional issue, and everyone seems to be looking for a solution. And I don't know if there is one solution, but one thing we talk about a lot, and some towns have tried it, and some towns have tried it with success, is that there's definitely parity between alcohol and vaping and marijuana. All are age-restricted products. Now that the age will be 21 at the end of December, there's even more reason. Everybody would be shocked if we had no purchase, possession, use laws for alcohol or for marijuana. However, in the vast majority of communities in Massachusetts, there are no purchase, possession, and use laws. And I'm not talking about criminalizing it. I think the town of Reading, Massachusetts has a very innovative approach that young people who are caught juuling, smoking, vaping, using e-cigarettes, lose their rights to participate in their sport. And the parents need to be notified. The young people need to take and pass an education program, and then their rights to participate in their sport are reinstated. And if the violations continue, I don't know if anyone's ever been expelled, but there are suspensions. The town of Seekonk has purchase, possession, use laws, and they don't have the police patrolling the streets because that's not something I think the police need to be spending their time doing. But literally, in most communities in Massachusetts, someone can walk down a public street at 15 years old and be using a Juul, using an electronic cigarette, or smoking a Marlboro. It's just a fact of life. So I think that communities, I think education, not just with the parents. We've attended some parents' nights at the library in Reading, answered a lot of questions, been very, very impactful. I think the officer is absolutely right. I think parental education is a huge, something that really, really needs to happen, because there are probably some parents out there who have swallowed what the kids have been told, that this is no big deal. And the fruit flavors, the other flavors, kids are attracted to flavors the same way adults. You walk into any package store And at the register, there's a rack with 40 or 50 flavors of nips, and they're 99 cents. And you can buy a pineapple nip. You can buy a grape nip. You can buy a Maui something, Maui Wowie nip, a birthday cake nip. They're 99 cents, and they're for adults only, but flavors are a fact of life. You walk down most major supermarkets now, there's a beer and wine aisle. And it's not age restricted. The kids can't buy it, but mom's picking up a bottle of wine for dinner. She's walking down the beer and wine aisle with the kid. And most liquor stores in Massachusetts are not age restricted. If dad's buying a six-pack for the game, he can bring his son in with him. The kid just can't make a purchase. So I think education is critical, but I would truly like to ask you to think about maybe developing purchase, possession, and use laws. At least make it illegal. It's illegal for a kid to walk around with a Budweiser. At least make it illegal. Give the authorities, give the school authorities, the city authorities, the police department, at least a purchase and possession use law so that whether it's writing a ticket, and I know that's some communities don't want to deal with that. They think it's criminalizing it, but there needs to be, and I'm not excusing this at any level, but there needs to be a certain level of accountability. The kids need to be held accountable. They're held accountable if the police, and I think this officer would verify, if the kids were having a keg party after the prom and they weren't 21 and the police were called, the police would come, they would respond, and they would seize the alcohol because legally they can. They can't stop anyone. I'm sure a good-natured officer could stop a kid and say, give me that or stop using that device, but there's really no laws protecting it. I know I've said it several times. I would strongly ask this Board of Health in this community to take a look at purchase, possession, and use laws, and thank you very much.
Welcome. Thank you. There's folks in the audience, then we'll get to the board here. Is that it? Shall we begin with Fran?
So, Michelle, is the Julie, where did it get its name from? Why is it different than the e-cigarette? It's
Yeah,
just a
it's
particular
the same
product?
idea. It's just a brand name. Juul's a brand name, and speaking of branding, they've essentially branded it to kind of create a verb, right? Like I'm juuling.
Right.
So it's like another way to just like entice kids, but it's just the brand name of that slender kind of USB looking device.
So you can actually see a vapor coming when you inhale, and
Very slight,
exhale?
very slight.
different
yeah.
than with an e-cigarette. They're longer.
The
showed
e-cigarette,
us.
right? So there's yeah. Hold on, I can show you. The
So it's easier, is it easier to
It's easier to conceal.
conceal a
Correct.
juuling device than an electronic
Right, a
cigarette?
Juul can fit in the palm of your hand, whereas an e-cigarette is going to be a little bit more difficult. So if you look up here, Juuls kind of are very slender, like
Mhm.
this.
Mhm.
Some of them come kind of that small, and then the actual e-cigarettes. Let me show you a picture. So e-cigarettes can look like this. Kind of first gen e-cigarettes looked like this, the vaping devices. Like I said earlier, I'm sorry, that's very small. We really don't see a lot of those anymore. The majority of what we are seeing and what our school administrators are confiscating are the Juuls, the very small, slender types.
And do we know who's manufacturing these? Is it the tobacco industry?
I don't
wait,
have the
I don't
answer to
know.
that.
Okay.
I am not certain.
Okay.
I can answer that question with your permission. Juul Labs, Dennis Lane Coalition for Responsible Retailing. Juul Labs is independent, as far as we know, of the major tobacco companies. It is a fairly new company, and Juul Labs is the owner of the Juul brand, but we believe it's not co-owned by any of the big tobacco companies. I believe Juul Brands is an independent company.
But they have to buy their nicotine from somebody.
But it's actually, the name of the business is Juul Labs, so I'm not qualified to answer that question.
I'm just curious. Okay.
Jeff?
Yeah, I'd like to, Michelle, get your comments on the idea of the purchase, possession, and use laws. It seems on face value that that would be a better approach as opposed to try to limit sale areas. And I completely agree with that. It seems to me, and I may be wrong, but the prevalence of online purchasing would be where to look right now. And it seems kind of retroactive to be looking at purchase of retail stores. It seems kind of this generation is gonna be looking more online. If we say you can't sell these now at any retail locations, it seems to be a low hurdle that we're giving them, as opposed to actually getting their hands on these things, or as opposed to a legal issue, be it for band or sports, things like that, where that punishment would have more of an effect on them.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you for bringing that up. I do agree. I think that having some type of consequence is important. As far as limiting the sale, I mean, I think anything we can do as a community is helpful, so I will take that stance. But I also do believe that a lot of it is purchasing online as well. And do I like the idea of holding kids accountable? As the gentleman said, I think that's a really good idea. A collaborative effort too, between the town and the schools.
What are your thoughts on retail purchases then? Again, if, knowing that obviously the state went to 21 and over, and that hasn't even been implemented yet, so all the analytic data we have won't even reflect that yet. What are your thoughts on that then? Most of the places have a fairly small footprint, at least in our town,
Sure.
as far as that goes. And so just what are your thoughts on that retail?
Yeah, I still don't like the idea of the retail purchases, just because, again, it's in your face, and particularly for kids who are impressionable, and it's how do we kind of stop the epidemic without it being in their face? And I know we can make the argument as well with alcohol and those types of products are visible to children. So I think, again, if we have a collaborative effort, I don't like it being in the kids' faces. I don't like it being so accessible, particularly when you can have a kid just go down to the local store and purchase it. Is it a little bit harder to purchase online? Yeah, because a lot of these sites you do need to show an ID. And again, we can take this to many lengths and say
Right.
kids are fabricating IDs and using mom and dad's eBay accounts and things like that. But it is a little bit more legwork. There is more of a digital footprint when you're buying it online. Is it easier to just run down to the local convenience store and kind of grab what you need? So I'm still going to kind of take that stance on the retail purchasing.
Because I'm a retailer, may I respond? So I've been a retailer in Massachusetts for 44 years, and my biggest nightmare is that the kids who were catching the school bus in my parking lot in the 70s and 80s are coming in with their kids now. And my biggest nightmare is that my staff or myself inadvertently sell to a minor. And in 44 years, I've had one warning and one violation. Considering 30, 40,000 people a month come through my store, I'm not proud of that violation, but retailers do not want to sell to minors. The worst thing a retailer can do is sell to a minor, because once that gets out there, mom and dad in the neighborhood are not coming in for the milk, they're not coming in for the Boston Globe, they're not coming in for the lottery ticket, they're mad. And so I think that we are the gatekeeper. We check IDs, and there's some really good fake IDs coming in from China, and we've probably confiscated 20 fake IDs in the past month, because there's a little trick on telling it. The Quincy police, where my store is, taught us a really quick, easy way to tell if an ID is fake. So, yeah, the kids are very innovative. They're going online, they're getting fake IDs, but towns like Andover and Marshfield, who have enacted flavor restrictions and taken these products out of stores and put them into vape shops, have seen no significant reduction, because, as the officer said earlier in her presentation, social sources. They're getting them from a social source, such as an older brother or a friend or somebody who's 18, 19, 20 who thinks they're cool buying somebody who's 17 a Juul because they don't think that a vaping device is dangerous. So the other thing is that we have to consider adults' rights. So I've got a guy that buys a grape cigar every afternoon on his way home. He smokes it in his pickup truck. His wife doesn't let him smoke it in the house. Why should he have to go find a vape store to buy a grape cigar to smoke it on his way home? So I think we have two issues: keeping it out of the hands of children and protecting adults' rights. But if you look at all the cities and towns in Massachusetts that have already banned retail sales of flavored products, it hasn't helped. The kids are going online. I have an Amazon locker in front of my store, and I don't know how it's used, but I've been in this industry all my life. The kids are going to CVS or Walgreens, I believe. They're buying a prepaid Visa or MasterCard. Then they're going online, and they're buying your Juul. And the age verification is you click a box that says I'm 18 or I'm 21, and then it says click to purchase. And they're sending it to a friend's house, a P.O. box, an Amazon locker, the vast majority of these, even the opposition is saying the vast majority of these purchases are happening online. So I think when you ban these flavors, and I've said a lot and then I'll shut up, I think when you ban these flavors, you're punishing the guy who's been in your community earning a living, who hires from your community. Everyone who works in your convenience stores lives in this community. You're punishing the guy who's IDing the kids, who's doing his job, and you're simply prohibiting his ability to send legal products to legal adults, when the reality is the vast majority of kids are simply clicking and buying, or an older person's buying them for them. It's like the old, hey mister, buy me a beer, it's $5, I'm 19, go buy me a beer. Excuse me. I think hurting the people who are protecting your kids is a mistake. Thank you.
Let me say ask one thing. Is there some type of training that's required for anyone that's working a register that sells tobacco products, that they have to have some type of training in IDing and identifying fake IDs or anything like that?
It's all part of the WeCard government program. And
Okay.
we get all of that material. And any responsible retailer, my help has been trained.
Is it a requirement, or is it just a responsible retailer's decision?
I don't know the answer to that, but I know the government provides all retailers on request, and most boards of health and most tobacco control offices provide us with all of the materials from the WeCard program.
Right.
It's such a big deal that I can't picture any retailer wanting to take that risk. So, and I just learned this a couple of months ago, and I've been doing this all my life. A really good way to, and the fakes that are coming in from China are amazing. But if you take your driver's license out and turn it over and hold it up to the light, you'll see a hologram of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and it's kind of bright. So a good tip to pass to your retailers is take 5 seconds, turn the license over, hold it up to the light. If there is not a good clear hologram, it's a fake.
But there's no guarantee that the person behind the register is gonna, unless you've got a retailer that's wants that to happen, that person behind the register is necessarily trained to see these things, or even actually gonna follow up with that.
You're absolutely right, but considering the fact that tobacco is approximately 40% of a convenience store's business in this day and age, when you take everything, do you really want to be sloppy and run the risk of paying fines that get bigger, and then after the third fine, depending on what community you're in, you lose your ability to sell tobacco? I couldn't pay my health, I couldn't stay in business, I couldn't pay my mortgage if I couldn't sell tobacco. And I sell tobacco responsibly to people who are of legal age. So I think the situation is most retailers would put themselves out of business.
And I think most owners would be responsible in that regard. I'm just not sure every single person behind the register would have the same thought process.
You're absolutely right, but once again, every once in a while, a T driver is texting with his phone, and he's been trained not to, and he drives in a telephone pole
Absolutely.
with a bus full of
Yep,
people. So
agreed.
stuff like this happens, but for the most part, like I said, I'm president of the New England Franchise Owners Association. I'm retired as chairman of the 7-Eleven for the whole country. I retired in 2009, 4,000 or 5,000 stores. I know the business, and everyone's different. I don't know everyone, and I don't know how everyone reacts or how everyone deals with things, but my mantra at my store is ID, ID, ID. It's my worst nightmare that my reputation be destroyed because one of my people inadvertently, or myself, sold to a young person. And these kids are getting really, really sneaky. And these IDs that are coming in from China, they are amazing. They're almost impossible to tell that they're a fake ID. But in 5 seconds, if you turn it over and hold it up to the light, you see that hologram, it's a legitimate ID. But
All right, we need to move on. We're
Okay.
being repetitious here.
Thank
I have a couple of questions. One is, you are based at the middle school, so you're the resource officer
Correct.
for the middle school.
Mhm.
What happens to a student who is caught vaping at the middle school? Because we've heard about some possible penalties, like, for example, the issue of if you're on a team, guess what, you're not playing. Are those kinds of penalties in effect?
Yeah,
Here?
at the middle school, they receive anywhere from a 1 to a 3-day suspension, and that's largely dependent on whether it's their first offense or their second offense, and so on and so forth. So it's minimum 1-day suspension if you're caught with the device in school.
Well, suspension is bad, but it's not sort of long-term, like losing your ability to be on a team. That's the whole season.
Right,
So-
and I'm not certain what how the high school manages that. I know there's a lot under MIAA. I know alcohol falls under that. I'm not sure that where tobacco products fall.
Yeah.
It's not within my purview. I don't have that.
Well, maybe we need to talk to KP about this. The other one is a simple question. What can the board do? What would you like to see the Board of Health do?
Yeah, I think more education, not putting it in the face of children, retail, and that, I take that stance with all tobacco products, and I know that's kind of a utopian view, but from somebody who dedicates her life to caring and protecting children, yeah, that's how I feel.
So let me just comment on that, if you don't mind my interrupting for a minute. So, so far, 129 communities out of 350 communities have enacted prohibition of sale of these products in retail stores. Now, I don't know, I can't speak to what Mr. Lang mentioned, that it hasn't made any difference, but I think, just like Officer Palladino said, I don't want to see this in their face. I walked into Walgreens. Pretty soon Walgreens won't be selling cigarettes at all, or cigarette products, because of the new law, and the pharmacies cannot, a store that sells, that is a pharmacy, can't sell tobacco products as of the new law, and that, I think that'll go into effect October 25th of this year. So we won't see them in Walgreens at all. We won't see e-cigarettes or Juuls or tobacco products. But there are still several convenient marts around town that you can walk into, and you'll see the e-cigarettes and the Juul products. And maybe you could speak to the cost of,
Yeah, I mean, the little
items.
bottles of liquid are a couple dollars. The
How mu-
devices itself are upwards of 50, 60, 70.
yeah,
So,
so they're also very expensive. And then the health risks, again, I mean, that's where I'm coming from. All of the chemicals, antifreeze, propylene glycol, that are in these products. And then there's a whole slew of them, of different carcinogens that they put in these products. That's what I'm hoping we can do something about it. We can educate the kids. So I think we have to come at this through different, approaches, education.
but I think talking with the schools is a good start, definitely, just to kind of see
Well,
where.
I mean, the educators are in the best position, I would think, to educate, quite frankly. I mean, the Board of Health has some contact, but not an awful lot. So I guess, I think from the board's perspective, the one thing we really focus on is health. And the issues of the ingredients that we know are there. We need to know what the concentrations are. We need to know what data has been collected on, are people getting sick? Because you can have these long lists of ingredients, and, if they're there at a part per billion or a part per million, that means one thing. If they're there at a much higher concentration, it means something else again. And some things, of course, even at a part per million or part per billion, are not good at all. So we need to get some sort of solid epidemiological data. We need to have that kind of information before we start, passing rules and regulations. And I believe it is being collected. I think there is research that's going on right now, in what responses have been to these products. We need to base our decisions on the best data that we have available. Now, I'm assuming you're aware of some of this information. Is that something you'd be happy to share with our board?
As far as research,
Yeah.
I don't have anything here in front of me,
Well,
but there are studies out there for sure. But I would rather see somebody a little bit more qualified to provide that.
Well, I know.
Right.
And I understand that's not your
Yeah.
job. Ultimately, it's our job in some respects here.
So can I just interrupt one more
Sure.
time?
Go ahead.
So the reason this whole thing got started was because Dr. Lester Hartman sent an email to this board, and he wanted to come and speak to us about the epidemic.
Mhm.
And so he wasn't available this evening, but I would hope that we could have him come and talk to those issues that you're concerned about. And this article was one of the attachments. It's
Mhm.
adolescent exposure to toxic volatile organic chemicals from e-cigarettes. So he has the data that I think that you're looking
Okay,
for.
we need to get in
So
there.
we should, have him come in as well and open it up again, maybe to the, all of our meetings are open to the community, and maybe we can try and do a little bit more publicity to get more people in, or ask him to go to the high school.
Yeah.
You've had him here before, I think,
Oh,
when you
yeah,
first
on
enacted
the
the
tobacco
21.
21.
Right.
Yeah, which, by the way, I mean, this is going to become statewide at the end of December, but in fact, in Norfolk, it's been true for quite a bit longer than that, as you're probably aware. I mean, there is this whole issue of the gateway, and then also the pathway of this material basically trickling down from older siblings, from
Mhm.
friends. And it's our hope that when the 21-year limit kicks in, that you begin to take off some of that availability, because no longer will a 2 or 3 year older sibling, be feeding stuff to the middle school because they can't get it either.
Agreed.
So it's going to help us a lot, I think, in trying to control these materials. I'm not going to stop it, but we have a shot at least of slowing down some of this sort of social network
Yes.
kind of distribution.
Mm-hmm.
And there is something where the board, if you have some ideas about things that the board can do more or less in terms of publicity,
Mm-hmm.
and you and also the officer in Rentham at the high school. I mean, I presume you two work together on this one because
We
you're
do.
kind of
Yeah, we
really
do.
working on the same problem.
Right.
Um,
And much more prevalent, at the high school as well.
Yeah.
And I know our parents, as evidenced by all of these comments, are hungry for some sort of solution, whether that be in the form of education.
Well, educating the parents is huge here.
Correct,
I mean,
correct.
your data suggests that they already suspect that there are
Mhm.
things in the vaporous, it's an aerosol, as you said, that are bad for their kids. But they could probably use some good hard data too.
Well, that's
Say-
just it. We know it's harmful, but how specifically is it harmful? Because we're trying to fight what the children are finding online, that it's, it's water vapor, it's not that harmful, what's in that atomizer, and things like that. So I think it would be really helpful to have facts are always helpful.
It can be.
Mm.
Not always, but
You know you're gonna find conflicting reports put out by other people that says they
Sure.
aren't harmful,
Mhm.
maybe. We'll see. See what the data says. Well, thank you very much, Michelle, for coming.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me.
We do appreciate all the work that you're doing.
Yeah,
Thank
thank you
you.
for all the work in the middle school.
Sure thing.
Thank
My
you.
pleasure.
Is there anything you wanted to add at the very end here to?
No? No?
All right,
Said it
well, thank
all.
you very much for
Yeah,
coming in.
thank you. I
Thank you.
appreciate it. All right.
And thank you, Dennis.
You're very
Thank
welcome.
you.
Thank you for your time. I'm
Yeah.
sorry for being a little repetitive.
No, useful comments. Oh,
Did you have a comment?
Yes, would it be possible to make a quick comment?
Sure.
So, good evening, my name is Nicholas John. I'm the Northeast Region Manager for the R Street Institute. And Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to speak to what you were referring to about studies and information on e-cigarettes and vapor products. I had sent a comprehensive packet of testimony to the Public Health Coordinator on some of the studies that have come out and position statements about e-cigarettes and vapor products, namely from the American Cancer Society, the Royal College of Physicians, and the or the National Academies of Sciences, which have pointed out that e-cigarettes and vapor products pose a much reduced risk to combustible tobacco products, i.e. cigarettes, which continue to be the leading cause of preventable death in the United States. It's around 480,000 people pass away from use of cigarettes every year in this country. And the increased rate of vaping among minors is incredibly disconcerting. But as Mr. Kane pointed out, the Commonwealth has stepped in and moved to increase the age of purchase to 21. And the reality is, we're not just talking about minors. We're talking about encouraging current and future smokers to use less harmful products that do exist. And a policy that leaves all of the combustible tobacco products on store shelves in plain sight, but removes less harmful alternatives and options for current and future smokers to use, is not in the interest of the public health. I applaud, I certainly do, the effort and the fact that this board is taking the time to consider this, because it is incredibly important. And again, while we're talking about minors on one side of it with flavors, longtime smokers also find flavors appealing. And if somebody is of legal age to go into a store and they have the option to choose between an e-cigarette that, as the American Cancer Society and the National Academies of Sciences has said, pose reduced risk, versus combustible tobacco, which we know what those products inevitably lead to, I believe they should have the option to do so. And again, I would just encourage you to look through the comprehensive testimony that I had submitted before the hearing, and thank you for your time.
Can I just comment? I don't think that cigarette smoking cessation products will be not allowed to be sold in pharmacies, or maybe they'll be able to sell those products. So I agree with what you're saying. Those aren't necessarily the electronic cigarette products that we're the flavored electronic cigarette products that we're talking about.
Well, may I speak to that?
Sure, sure.
So I would just say that, you know, again, there are certainly Nicorette gum and the patch, which can be sold at pharmacies and other places like that. Those options are great. They don't work for everybody. Not everybody wants to use those products. And again, specifically in my testimony, what I do is outline the reduced risk of e-cigarettes and vapor products. Again, as Mr. Lane had pointed out, you know, Juul is a product of its own. That seems to be the new craze because it's concealable and it's popular and it's sleek and what have you. Again, increasing the age of purchase to 21 in this community and across the Commonwealth is a great move. And as Mr. Lane also pointed out, it's not just about looking at convenience stores. People are getting these products, whether it's the entrepreneurial 30-year-old who wants to sell it or what have you and make a profit. There are other avenues to get them. But it should not be the goal of a Board of Health to tell somebody who is of legal purchase age and who is a smoker or who will take it up to say, oh, well, all the products that you've used for years are going to be on all the store shelves. But we're taking away limiting options to use the less harmful products at a gas station or what have you. And again, you know, it's wonderful that these products are not going to be in pharmacies. It's great. We should have done that decades ago because we've known about the health risks of combustible tobacco for a very long time. E-cigarettes shouldn't be sold at pharmacies or anything like that. But at a convenience store, when you walk in and you see a pack of Marlboro Lights and you said, okay, well, I would have wanted to try an e-cigarette or a vapor product that carries a reduced risk, but that's gone, so now I'll just switch right back to the cigarettes because they're easier. It's not something that's going to benefit anybody.
Well, let's not speculate on human behavior here. It's too complicated. So if there are no other additions to this conversation, I think we need to move on. We have other folks who want to talk about other things tonight.
Thank you for your time.
You're
Thank you.
very welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If we could just invite Dr. Hartman.
Sure, he was invited once
to come
already.
To the, yeah, to the
He
next
just couldn't make
meeting.
it apparently,
Appreciate
right?
it. Right.
Yes, ma'am?
Ms. Sullivan, you asked if Big
What's your,
Tobacco,
please identify yourself.
Peggy Bedard, 28 Lawrence Street. You asked if Big Tobacco is behind e-cigarettes, and it says in an article from Maclean's Canada, it looks like, yet an industry that emerged as a potential alternative to traditional tobacco and was once populated with smaller independent manufacturers is now dominated by big tobacco. So likely it is.
Thank you.
All right. Moving on, we have some minutes to look at from June 19th.
That's before sale date for you. Before you disembarked.
Are there any comments, corrections, changes, motion to approve?
We're missing page 2.
Page.
I've got 1 and 3 here. Do we have a, is it 1 and 2 instead of 1 and 3? While we're searching on that, Board of Health correspondence, do we have anything to bring up with us?
Let's see, just a few things. So I asked about, this was from May 18th, and it talked about a post-temporary solution status report for the former Caritas Southwood Hospital. I was asking you folks what that meant, made to the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection, why we were receiving it. Anyway, so this is also a hazardous waste site. You folks know that. You've been here long enough that you know that. And they had, I did call up someone at DEP, and they told me that I could find the reports online. And so I went to the report, and it just said nothing new at that site, and because there's been no one's looking to do anything there. But if they were to do anything, then they have a plan for cleanup there.
Why people haven't done anything.
But they have to look at it every year. So that's what that's all about. And other things, there were 5 cases of exposure to brown bats. They were tested for rabies, and none of the bats were positive. But just so you'll know, that happened in town. And I think the last time I was concerned about the MCI Norfolk audit, that there were so many items. And so DPH has accepted their plan of correction, but they mentioned that, DPH mentioned that, you know, there are a couple of things that are at issue, and that was the size of the space that the inmates are kept in, and that's a function of money. And so they understood that there was nothing that could be done about that at this point, but all of the other audits.
As an issue in the report?
Um,
I don't remember that. I remember some more specific issues about cleanliness and things. I don't remember the
They
space.
talked about overcrowding.
Did they?
Yeah, in the report. But everything else they accepted, so just to keep that. And the water quality report from MCI had high levels of manganese and iron for April, but it should be corrected. No, it would be corrected in April because there's a new treatment system there at MCI. So that's pretty much all of the,
Yeah, is manganese and iron a health issue? More of a hard water issue, isn't it?
no, manganese can be a problem,
High levels?
high levels, but, I mean, it has to be a tremendous amount. Right.
Well, they're more sensory than they are
Yes, it's a hard
after your
water
health. I
type
mean,
issue.
we're talking about, like, your water smells bad, for one thing.
No, but I think they also affect the nervous system.
I think
it's at a
Really
crazy
high
level.
levels?
Well, they can't get too high because they're solid. It's manganese oxide. It's that black stuff that's in your toilet bowl that
You see
is.
it in the ground, it does, it's solid, so when you do perks and soil evaluations, you'll find nuggets of it. Dissolves a little, but. All right, that was interesting.
Well, anyway, yeah, iron
I
and
thought
manganese
there was
are
more.
traditionally an issue, but
Iron.
dealing with things like dingy wash and smelly water and,
No, and soapy.
clogged up plumbing. I gotta
I'll
check
have to
if
go
the
back.
manganese was
I-
actually a nutrient. I'm not quite sure.
Well, you do have to have some manganese, but I'm
Yeah.
talking about high levels.
I just don't know if it's realistic to
think
get to
I
that
remember
level for
that.
drinking water.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Uh-huh. So meanwhile, we're back to the new and improved page longer minutes. Maybe I'll go over this next time.
Yeah, I
Because we
agree with
haven't
that,
seen
'cause I
this
wanted to
yet.
go through this one with
All
the.
right, we will deal with this
I'll email them to you too.
soon.
Sorry.
All right. So if we're all done with the correspondence,
Mhm.
then we're on to, actually, we're on to our neighbors from Lawrence Street are here again. Do you have something particular to bring up tonight? Is this on the agenda, or is this just continuing? That's
And
my
we
thing
did
here.
just receive the updated report from Webster and Sampson, is that right? Yeah, we just received that tonight. I don't know if you reviewed it, I just started glancing over it, so. Have you folks seen it yet?
Email.
We haven't, sure you can get an email copy, right?
Hmm?
We can provide an email copy, I assume, or,
Sure, you can just reach out to the town planner.
and we just got that tonight, so I don't even know if anyone's reviewed it yet, really, so.
When did it come in?
Oh, you haven't seen it, you were in the
Yeah.
vote.
I was on the boat.
You won't vote tonight? You just got back? Oh, really? I didn't know you were just off the boat.
Just off
I didn't realize it was that soon, oh. Yeah,
So,
but-
so is there a particular,
On the agenda.
I'm looking,
It said 40B update on the agenda.
okay, yep, does. Floor is yours, ma'am.
Sandra Myatt, 8 Everett Road. I was wondering, did you have the water test from the town wells yet on the levels of arsenic and chromium? They were being
Do
tested?
we have? I've not seen it.
I haven't
I haven't
seen,
seen it, but again, reach out to Rich McCarthy.
The
And-
board has not seen it.
Okay, and will you be attending the next public involvement plan meeting is scheduled for Tuesday in the library at 7 o'clock, and you are on the distribution, just wondering if anybody will attend?
I will certainly try to. I
Like
think
to.
I was there the last time.
I was out of town for the last one, I'd like to get to this
Yeah.
one, I would.
so there's another meeting that night, so I won't be there, but I was asking if the cable will also record it like they did the last meeting, then I'll be able to see it.
I'm not sure, but I did ask if somebody
If,
could do it.
so you did, okay,
But I'm not sure yet.
okay.
No, I know just from reviewing the Webster and Sampson report briefly tonight, I mean, there was a list of recommendations that they did come up with additional testings in certain areas, and some of them, I think, addressed what you brought up at the last time you were here. I'm not sure if all of them are brought up, but there was a significant list of deficiencies or additional testing they said should be done, so. It may be obviously worth reviewing that report when you get a chance to.
This is Tuesday at the library, what time?
At 7 PM?
Okay.
But then on Wednesday is the next ZBA meeting
Yeah.
for the Abbeville project.
Mhm.
And that might also be a good one to attend to
Yes.
see what's up with that. You know. So we're concerned, there are multiple things going on at this site. So we have the bridge project that is scheduled to start. They're gonna block off the street and tear up the Lawrence Street Bridge. Are you aware of the causeway plans? And so we know that there's arsenic in the bush pond, and we're just wondering if there's going to be dust from the road and the project, are they doing any protective measures as far as, you know, dust from the site, which could be contaminated?
Well, are they actually disturbing the pond?
Well, they're actually digging up the road,
Yeah.
and of course,
Besides,
right,
but in
all the
terms
way
of-
down, the whole causeway, all the way down.
Right.
So the history of the site is over, well, it dates back to the early 1800s. And of course, it was probably just a dirt road. And they may have carted all the chemicals in that way. And, you know, it just never has been studied as far as the banks of the pond and the road surface itself for any contaminants.
Well, there is arsenic, there's kind of a record of arsenic contamination. Well, I should say contamination. It's higher, unusually high levels of arsenic in that area. You're right, and in the pond itself. My understanding was that the bridge construction was not going to disturb the sediments of the pond, which is where we know there are some high concentrations of arsenic. Your concern apparently is that if it was coming in from the roadway and they're disturbing the roadway, that's going to have an impact on arsenic levels generally. Is that where your worry is?
Well, just that nobody knows what's under the road. They're going to dig up the road, and then they're going to make it wider and resurface it.
Mhm.
So if the soil surrounding there is loaded with arsenic, wouldn't the soil that they created the road with likely be loaded with arsenic? And potentially, what Sandra said, if they had carts that came over with chemicals, or chemicals that left the site,
Do we
and
have
traveled
records
over
of
that
arsenic
road.
being transported in this area? Because I'm not aware of it.
So the site is from like the early 1800s. So it would have been a dirt road likely back then. And if they were transporting chemicals in and out of that site, more than likely
That's the
there's
thing I'm having a
spillage
hard
as well.
time with. I mean, what data do we have to suggest that actually is true?
We have no data whatsoever. That's the point.
And
So
that
we
could-
don't know what the soil has for contaminants in terms of arsenic, and we have no data if it's been explored for contaminants that possibly were carted in and out of the site.
That could honestly be any road, any piece of property in this whole town that was a farm or existed as a road back in the day. If it transported arsenic for some reason in some type of container in a horse-drawn carriage over that causeway, that could have come to the center of town or any other place. I mean, that's a tough one to require testing on. Now, the receiving area for the soil, most of the times we'll test it to make sure what they're getting is not contaminated. Now, I'm not sure where they're planning on bringing the soil. And the reason I say this, if someone's bringing in soil that's contaminated, it goes to the owner of that site now, so they don't want to bring dirty soil in, so to speak. So I'm not sure where they're planning on taking that soil, but I've never seen a requirement from the Board of Health to check excavated soil for that type of contaminant. If the ZBA felt like they should actually put some type of testing requirement on it, you could bring that to their attention, but I've never seen that happen. The only time I've ever seen it happen, if you were digging at a known site, if you went to that carbonizer or that lagoon area and you taking material that you tested, you know is at that high level, and you're taking it off site, well, that's a different animal. But as Tom kind of alluded to, there's no reason to expect that there's some type of spill or contamination in the roadway.
Well, they're not necessarily removing a lot of soil, they're just disturbing the site, and that would just be a dust problem in the neighborhood.
How,
Focusing on the arsenic,
Mhm.
yeah.
which you know is in the soil there.
Well,
Well,
no,
it's in the pond.
right, we don't know
So you
what's in
think
the
it's
causeway.
road that was created probably from the soil surrounding
Well,
that area?
there's no quid pro quo here. There's no, if it's there, it's got to be there. That's not true. The water, I mean, the source of the arsenic could be, for example, groundwater that flows into the Mill River, that flows into the pond. Eagle Brook further up, same story.
Direct
That has
dumping
nothing to
into the
do
pond.
with the roadways surrounding it. So, I mean, we know that there has been some concentrations of arsenic, unusually high ones, in groundwater samples taken, like, for example, when they were testing for putting in private wells some time ago. So we know that it's around there, has been for some time. To assume that because it's in the water going into the pond, therefore probably in the sediments in the pond too,
Mhm.
that does not necessarily mean that the surrounding countryside is a source of the arsenic. It's,
See-
could be something else.
You're saying it's the water only, because we were informed previously that it was the soil that was contaminated with arsenic. That's what we have been informed of.
But not in the
Soil
road.
where? What soil?
The soil in and around that property is naturally high in arsenic. Am I incorrect on that?
I thought it was the pine tree.
Well, groundwater, well, yeah, presumably the arsenic is in something which is leaching into the groundwater. So it could be, for example, in soils or even deeper in like subsoil. Arsenic levels could be high for whatever reason. We don't know what that is.
Right, so if they're digging that up, they're going to be potentially tearing up dust that would contain high levels of arsenic. That's the concern, that's the
Yeah,
question. That's the
I
heart of the
see
question.
your connection, but I'm frankly, as a scientist, I'm having a hard time making it a strong connection. If it's deep underground sources that are leaching into groundwater, leaching into streams, leaching into the pond, that part I get. To assume that the surface soils around the pond are somehow contaminating the pond, that's a whole different route. And we haven't seen any data to suggest that's actually happening. So, I mean, there are some things to worry about that site, some very important things. This one's not popping up, for me anyway, as something I'm worried about as a chemist. So, take it for what it's worth, until some more data comes along. Anything else?
What was the 40B conversation you were having besides asking us about Lawrence Street?
Oh, the other 40B projects that are in town, just the updates on those.
General updates.
Right.
Yeah.
I
mean,
think
the-
we would have, as far as Lawrence Street goes, I think we will be planning on mentioning that report just came in. And said none of us have actually had the chance to go through it thoroughly. We just, I know I glanced through it, so I know there is some data in there, obviously you're gonna find interesting, so.
I don't think we have any other,
I have no other
I mean, there are a lot of 40Bs going on in town, as you're probably aware. Which by itself is an issue for the town, but
Just one
We have,
email about the one on Seacon
Yep.
Street. There's a
neighborhood
meeting.
meeting Thursday
Thursday.
night at 7.
is that, where is it here? Cause I didn't see, it was room 124,
Yeah.
is that's here.
Yep.
Yeah,
and,
that one I wanna get to too.
yeah.
Is that the only updates we have on them?
That is.
Yeah.
So, just for clarification, Jeff, every time a company takes soil, they're gonna test it?
Not every time, it's up to them if they wanna test it, otherwise they own it. If they're taking soil from a site they don't know about and put it on their site, and that ends up being contaminated and contaminating their site, well, they've just created their own problem.
In most cases, would they test it?
No, in
No.
most cases, you're not expecting to run into anything like that. If you're taking it out of the city, if you're taking it out of excavation in Boston, then yes, you're gonna test it for what they call S1 standards. You might even seen that standard in that report. But if you're coming from an area out here in the suburbs, typically you don't test it. You're not expecting to find anything besides maybe some background levels of whatever, you know?
And
But
how
again,
old is Buckley Man? How long was that in existence? Buckley,
these folks are-
1901,
That was Buckley and Mann.
right,
That was Buckley and Mann. There was a tannery before then.
okay.
There was a coexisting paper factory with Buckley and Mann. There was,
Coexisting with Buckley and
back to
Mann,
the
but
1830s, it dates.
there were different
There were different chemicals.
chemical companies
Yes.
manufacturing.
Well, there was a third one.
Tannery.
There was a felting mill as well.
Hmm.
It's
That's
quite
interesting.
extensive.
Yeah, I was thinking tanneries, and if you think of the chemistry of tanning, you know, there's some compounds that we're seeing high concentrations of in the Buckley and Mann site. I wonder,
Like what?
chromium. Chromate was used, probably still is, for tanning. Arsenic.
So, obviously, the bridge work is part of this project. And
No,
was
it's-
this concern ever voiced at the ZBA as far as testing the material?
We've been told on numerous times they are unrelated.
It's not part of the project.
Thought it was, no?
No,
Okay.
they're two separate things.
So
Well,
who's,
this is a town project.
is the town
Town
project?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Have you asked the DPW about testing it?
So yes, we've asked to have them test the pond for more recent testing, because I think the most recent one was 2014, and the banks of where they're going to be digging, and we did not get anywhere.
It's honestly, being involved in this type of work with the excavation, it's an odd request. You don't typically see it tested. And again, even working in Boston on the big dig, where you had some pretty nasty contaminated soils, airborne was never a concern, even with the excavations we had there. Airborne dust was not a concern. It just, so that's why you're probably seeing maybe some blank faces when you have it, because unless you have a site that's known contamination, it's just background. I mean, you can look at some of these areas and you're gonna find lead because they used to have leaded gasoline, and from the exhaust, you're gonna find it in some of these soils and things too, but it's background levels, you know?
Just curious, how many people live very close to the big dig? I mean,
A lot.
some of these houses are very close.
Well, you have a lot of high-rises in South Boston and the downtown area. I mean, you are literally sometimes underneath residential areas. So yeah, they were on top of them. And then you have a prevalence of wind, and you have a much larger excavations than you had what we're talking about here.
Are they contained in tunnels, though, when they're digging?
No, no, definitely not. Most of that was open cut. The vast majority was open cut. And you did run into some obviously very contaminated soils, but the levels and you're dealing with it, just, you know, unless you came in, what you would typically do if you were into an excavation and you started digging and then you came with something, the first thing would hit you would be the smells that would tell you that there's something going on here. Obviously, you're not gonna smell arsenic. But I think to actually have those levels, I don't think there's any levels even that I've seen on the site that they'd be so concerned with going airborne. So, I just never seen an excavation that you're talking about here being a concern unless it's a known contaminated area. And that's probably why you're getting some, no responses or just kind of blank looks, so.
Anything else you'd like to bring up with us? Sorry, we're not being quite as responsive as sometimes we are. But
Well, I mean, the
I'm
Buckley-
not seeing this one as up there with some of the
Yeah,
other really
and the
important
Buckley
issues.
Man, like you said, is very significant. You read through it, obviously there's some significant concerns, so.
Okay.
Well, is there any way you can request any sort of testing as a Board of Health
Well,
before the project begins?
Well, there needs to be a sort of clear and present indication of a problem. And right now, the only issue we have with arsenic is the contamination of the pond and the water flowing into it. So the argument that somehow that roadway is contaminating the pond, we have no data to suggest that's true.
And you don't have any data that proves that it's not true?
Well, yeah, you can't prove the null hypothesis. I mean, that's the problem here.
Well, that's why, you know, it would be good to do just one or two tests.
Well,
It's
there needs
just-
to be some kind of, maybe
Right.
Jeff's already said, it, there needs to be some indication, and right now there's none. So, you know, there's,
There's no indication that that would be a source of contaminant anyway either. I just,
Has there been any testing of the pond to see if there's contaminants from Buckley and Man in the pond?
I think if you read through that new report, they may speak on that. It's definitely more clear and concise, that Stone and Webster report. And there was talk of pond, exactly where they tested. Again, I didn't get through all of it, but you should probably read through it.
Did you say Stone and Webster? Did
Who
you say that?
put it, I'm sorry, who was that?
Weston and Sampson.
Weston and Sampson, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, of course, the comprehensive permit process is still going on for Abbeville, and I'm just wondering if you as a board will be making comments to the ZBA about any of the health risks that you're concerned with for that project?
Yeah, we had to comment on that. Once we read through that report, we should give our comments.
well, I mean, we have been commenting all along, but certainly if there is some kind of a document that we can respond to, we definitely will.
Mhm.
So the document that you have from Weston and Sampson, so you'll make a
the one you
comment to
just
the
got?
ZBA?
Yeah, we just got it. I said, yeah, I
Yeah.
think we read through it, we'll, absolutely.
We promise to read through it, okay?
Mhm.
Maybe not as thoroughly as you guys do, but we will get through it.
Well, it was, like I said, it seemed to be written in a lot clearer voice than maybe some of the other reports that have gone through. At least they try to
Mm.
kind of compile all the information that's gone through in the years, so.
Thank you.
Jump to
We
that
have
one.
a bunch of agent appointments here. Should we do them all at once?
Yeah, just do them as a group unless someone's got an issue with any they've gone through.
This Betsy Fugel, I don't know. So, is there a motion to make these appointments? Requires somebody reading them off.
All right, I'll make the motion.
Before Jeff-
Motion to accept agent appointments of Wade Sussier and Tom Houston as the health agents. Betsy Fugel, how did I pronounce that right? Board of Health Administrative Assistant and Agent. Carol Green, Town Clerk for issuing burial permits. Mark Oram, Sanitarian for restaurant inspections and housing code inspections. Hillary Cohen as the Animal Advisory Agent. Ed Nolan as the Emergency Preparedness Agent.
Is there a second?
I
Or
just have a
question.
question about Ed Nolan. I thought he came under the Board of Selectmen.
The emergency management director, he works as our emergency preparedness agent.
Okay. So he works also for the Board of or he's also appointed by the Board of Selectmen?
He's the emergency management director, yes.
For the Board of Selectmen and for the Board of Health?
He's an emergency preparedness agent
Okay,
for us.
okay.
These
So
are
what
sort of
does he do?
multi-use people here.
What, okay, I'm just trying to figure out what he does for us.
Well, he
I mean,
can
I know
run-
what everybody else does
it's
for
just that
us.
we appoint him as an agent to the board, he can advise us for emergency preparedness. He can work for us in the, capacity as a Board of Health agent if there were an emergency.
He could. Is there any way to hold that until I understand it a little bit more?
Yeah, I don't understand it either.
Okay.
It's just one of our annual appointments.
I don't remember this from last year, honestly, I
Well, he's
don't.
been around.
No, but I don't remember
Right.
this listed last year, so
He's-
I just, is there a,
You want to make an amended
Yeah, there's no
motion?
job
I-
description
If you'd like to
or
delete
anything like
Ed
that.
Nolan's,
Yeah, read
appointment
through
for
the
right
list now.
now, we can go get the details of what exactly his responsibilities under this
okay,
position
so I
are.
motion that we hold the appointment of Ed
Okay.
Nolan.
All right, so is there a
And
motion
I
to
s-
approve the others as
and
now
I-
amended?
We've done all of that, and I second the motion, the
Do
motion
we
to.
have, do we have information of what Ed does available right now?
No.
No.
So
All right.
I
So-
second the motion, the
Okay,
motion to
everybody,
approve.
everybody but
So
Ed.
it's just the Board of Health if we need help in developing plans, if there was ever an emergency,
And,
he could act on our behalf if we needed him to.
and this is probably a very small amount of time that's even
There's
allotted for
no-
this,
there's-
right?
No, there's just, it's,
I just confused why we're beating this thing with a tiny little,
there's no job description, there's
Exactly.
no.
we've always had them there as emergency in case, and
It's
for a
just
very
in
small
case
amount.
If there's ever an emergency, we needed to.
Yeah, I just don't understand why we're gonna put this off another 2
right.
months just
Well,
over this month.
the reason that I'm asking to do this is because we've been trying to get this emergency dispensing plan done for
Well,
But he's
6
not-
months, and he keeps telling me it's not his responsibility.
And the town's emergency management plan.
Right, and the town's emergency management plan, but specifically, that comes under, my understanding was, it
The Board
comes
of
under the
Selectmen.
Board of Selectmen. But the
That's his job, is
emergency
the
dispensing plan, I would guess that would be part of his responsibility, and I'm not seeing that,
By
and he's
holding
telling
this
me
up
it's
doesn't
not.
change it. If you can look at it after the effect, if that's part of his purview, he has to do it. If it's not, it's not, but he does other potential things for us if there is an emergency. So by not voting him in this time and waiting a month and a half, doesn't change what is in scope of work under our board.
Well,
If it's there, it's there, if it's not, it's not. So
That's
if it's
still-
under, if it's what he has to do, then he has to do it under the current scope he has that we're approving him for.
What scope is that?
It doesn't matter at this point. He does the emergencies in case it comes up. If that, what you're looking for is under that scope, then he'll do it. If it's not, it's not. But by holding it up for another month and a half before we do it, it's not gonna change anything.
I don't see,
Well, it
lit-
kind of is
the
like
conversation.
Hillary, it's like Hillary, the animal control officer. She works as an agent for the board. If there was ever you know, there's a dog bite, she can follow it up, she'll follow it up on our behalf,
Yeah,
you know.
I hear that. And she has, I guess, with these rabies testing that have been done. Okay. But I don't see that with.
But you can look
Ed.
into his scope after, he's still gonna be working for us. You're free to look into his scope of
Okay,
work.
do I have the authority to ask to
You can
hold
ask.
this?
I tell you
Okay.
what we should do, because it has been raised, why don't we invite Ed in? And if there is an issue with the dispensary and we need to, we could use some help. And if it's not being forthcoming, can we invite him in and ask for the help?
Well, again, and I'll just tell you that he has said that if there had to be an emergency dispensing site opened, he would just tell the Board of Health to do it. So I don't understand what his responsibility is as our agent. So if you
Well,
want to,
it's
if
a
you
fair
want to.
question.
Agent, if there were an emergency dispensing site, he would be playing a very active role in that. He would have to.
Okay,
Well, I tell you what, I'm
think-
I'm sympathizing a bit here with Fran, and that it'd be really kind of good to know what exactly that agency means in a public health emergency. So let's invite it, yeah,
Sure.
see if they show up.
Yeah, I think that would be a fantastic idea.
All right.
I think it's
So we
overkill.
decide,
I think you can still vote him in right now, and then
well, let's
bring him
wait,
in.
let's wait. I mean, right
When
now,
are the- when are
I'd
the
rather
s-
do it,
When do the
unanimous.
appointments need to be voted in? Is a contract running out? Yeah, exactly. So now we're
Sometime
gonna wait
soon.
another month. I think we should do the voting first and still call him in. He's still an employee.
Okay, well,
He
you
can come
can
in.
make that motion,
All right, I have a motion to accept as just stated,
the whole list.
the whole list.
Including it.
Including it.
Is there a second? I hear no second,
Okay.
so let's move along. How about everybody but Ed?
I'm not seconding that.
I
Okay.
second the motion.
Well, you should make the motion, because.
Okay, I thought I did. I motion that we accept all of the
All those who are red except
individuals
for Ed.
except for Ed
All right,
Nolan.
I will second that motion. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All against?
Aye.
All right. And we'll invite Ed in the next meeting. All right, Mark's contract.
Which one?
Contract remains the same, I think the hourly rate went up slightly.
Who signs the contract? Do we? Yeah, we do. We do. But we don't actually
$75 per
control the
hour.
expenditure of funds.
Right, I'm sorry, what was that?
Authorizing the funds to be expended, we don't,
You guys don't sign the vouchers
not no more, no.
department head.
Right.
Budgeted the same amount, we always work within that, so.
So do you know what it went up?
I think it was $5 an hour. I think it went from 70 to 75.
Oh.
Sure thing.
It's loud.
So this is what he does, this is not how much it's gonna make him.
Correct, I believe his hourly rate is on page 3, no?
Right, it was on page
Sorry.
2,
Page 2, yep,
at the top.
top of the page, yep.
Oh, okay, it is there, all right. Is there a motion to approve this contract?
I I motion that we approve the contract for Mark Oren as the food sanitarian for restaurant inspections and housing.
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Do we have an original copy to sign? And next on the list is the VNA. Is that right behind Mark's?
It should be,
Call for
Tom.
motion.
Just like this.
Yep.
Is this the same as last year's?
It is, yep, and we have a budget of $2,500 for their services.
Just pass it across.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Fran.
Do we have a date for the flu clinic?
I'm
yet?
working on that. I have a potential date of October 18th, but I'm trying to confirm that.
Okay.
Is there a motion?
Motion to approve the Walpole Area Visiting Nurse contract for fiscal year 19.
Is there a second?
I second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
So,
And,
it just says chairman of the board.
yep, I
One
guess.
signature on this one?
Just requires your signature.
Thanks.
Do we ever see the statistical reports?
They send out an annual report to us.
So we could see it. I'd like to see that.
It's in the town report. It's on the town report, but
It's on the town report. It's on the website.
Yeah.
Okay.
yep.
Thanks.
So that will say if we had any measles, or, which we haven't, or anything like that.
Right. Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
It's not.
I have it
It's
too.
not the
if-
cancer
If you,
report.
no.
That's
It's
separate.
different.
Okay.
So
Thank
Yeah,
you.
they do. They send an annual report. It goes into the town's annual report, which just came out.
Okay.
So I don't know if you picked up a copy.
Oh, there's a hard copy?
There's a hard copy, yeah, available at the town clerk's office.
Okay.
So Fran, the next couple of years, MRC and,
Oh, the MRC, we're supposed to
Yeah.
meet next Tuesday. And what's going on? We're still working on the emergency dispensing site plan. And we had badges made for the people that were here the last meeting. And we're hoping that.
She's supposed to send those to me, right?
And I asked Amy about a first aid training that we could host here, and also,
I'd like
hope-
that.
yeah, hopefully we can work with the flu clinic as a kind of like a prep, but we can help
Right.
out like we
Right,
did the
as
last
a training
time.
exercise, yeah.
I'm just guessing that, you know, I think last year, do you remember how many people we had?
I
75?
don't, because I was
something?
away, so I don't remember the number.
It was very pleasant, right? Going over to the senior center.
It was.
Yes.
Very
And as opposed to, I mean, not that, I've been to pharmacies to have, get a flu shot as well, and it's, you know, it was in a corner, and it wasn't
Next
as
to the
pleasant.
jewels in
So,
there.
yeah.
It's a nice facility.
What do they do
Yeah.
with the senior facility? It makes it more pleasant.
But,
They're just nice people.
Serve coffee?
anyway, so if we could get the date and get the word out, then, because right now, I think the pharmacies are already advertising
Yeah.
Yeah.
flu,
Yeah.
you know, free flu shots, which is really not free. They're gonna
Covered.
Well,
cover
they'll
your,
bill
you know,
your
they're gonna
insurance,
charge
yeah.
your insurance
Right, there's
company, but,
no
you know.
copay usually.
But anyway, so we'll help with that. So it's still going, MRC is still going.
Who's the first aid training? Who's that open to? MRC members or?
It would be open to, first of all, MRC members, and then, like, the CPR course, if we
Right.
didn't have enough people, you know.
We open it up to
Public.
anybody.
Oh, really? Okay. When do you know, like, the how many people are gonna be doing it?
We haven't gotten to
It's
the
not
logistics yet.
prospect, okay.
I haven't even, you know, she hasn't even said whether, she said there was money for
Oh,
funding
okay,
for
hasn't even been-
training,
yeah.
but we haven't gotten
Okay.
that far yet.
Fair enough.
Are you interested?
I would be, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay, I'll
Okay.
keep you in mind.
Thank you.
All right,
Unanticipated.
that's those unanticipated new business. Do we have no
I
unanticipated?
have none unless anybody else has any.
Oh, should probably talk a little bit about the site there on Lincoln Street.
Oh, 15 Lincoln
Yeah.
Street. I went by it on my bike the other day, but there's a chain link fence up. I don't know, how can you see anything?
No, but years ago, it was that issue. Were you doing the site walks out there? I was out there as well. I was on Concom at the time, you were probably Board of Health, something at the time.
Mm-hmm.
What
So,
was it?
It was a junkyard at one point.
Oh, it was
Mhm.
a junkyard.
Yucca's Junkyard.
Oh, really?
And, so what, it went into, obviously it was bankrupt, and then it was put back to the owner? It was given back somehow to the owner? Is that what I read through the emails? Is that
Maybe.
correct? And then, so the concern is now is there's no one around to clean it up? No, I mean, obviously the owner still owns it. Do you have any idea what's going on with it? Have you heard any updates?
I haven't.
You asked Rich a question, didn't you, about
Well, I'm
it?
just concerned, I don't know who has control of the site right now.
Yeah.
And it'd be good to go out there and take a look at it. Last time it happened, we had all the boards go out in a big site walk, and, you know, identified some issues. I mean, off the bat, you could see there's piles of tires, and tires are solid waste at a certain number, and they also have mosquito breeding grounds, obviously. So someone, and there's also fire hazards with the fire, with the tires piled up like that. So just off the cuff, there's that.
There was some cleanup that happened as a
Yes,
result of that,
significant
correct?
amount, significant amount of
Right.
cleanup happened in.
Right, because even Rich said he could look at some of the Google
Oh,
Earth
yeah.
images from years ago, you know, compare it to 2017, and he said there was a considerable
Yes,
amount of
there
cleanup
was a lot.
that occurred, but I don't think anything's happened on the site.
No, and it almost looks like
Quite some
maybe,
time.
maybe some of it came back at some point, you know, because I remember he owned the one down in Rentham as well.
On
Toof.
Route 1?
Yeah, it was called Toof, whatever, foot
Right.
backwards.
Yeah.
And so he kind of shifted stuff back and forth and everything else, so, yeah, it'd be good to find out what's happening. I mean, this is.
Right, I think he was gonna reach out to town council to see if there was any avenue.
For us to get in there, so. it's- yeah,
Exactly.
Yeah, okay, so it'd be good to kept abreast on that, I guess.
Yeah.
Just because that was a big issue before.
Yeah, right.
It's a shame to see it come back, and
Not
said
gonna-
with that issue with fire
That's
and
gonna,
mosquitoes.
as anything,
and-
that's gonna take a little time,
Yeah,
so.
yeah, it did last time too, so.
Right, I know, he had gotten a call from, the Daisy Drive neighbor with concern, so I, you know, kind of explained a little bit to her and recommended that you reach out to Norfolk County Mosquito Control to see if they could maybe treat the property.
Right.
for mosquitoes.
Did they
So-
do that? I mean, I know they do the aerial spraying.
Yeah, I don't know, but I think that email that we got from that representative from the
Yeah,
mosquito
from-
control project.
They saw that.
So it sounds like maybe they did some treatment over there, and then maybe that's how
That's when they saw that.
saw some of the
Yeah, I mean, hopefully, the idea is.
issues, and obviously the tires and everything are mosquito breeding ground, and
I said, they should have permits in place. I don't know what they were operating with last time that they existed.
yeah.
I don't know what they were licensed to do, but there should be permits in place for what they needed to do, including the NIPD's permits that would have a whole slew of testing and everything else and responses. But if it's in bankruptcy and there's no one there to answer the phone, so to speak,
There may be no business.
right, that's what I'm saying, so I don't know what the avenue is. So-
Right, exactly. I don't think any of us know, so I
Right.
think that's gonna take a little,
So maybe town council has
Yeah.
some type of,
yeah.
okay.
Can I
Yeah,
add
no, is it-
just a quick question about, has the town water test for chromium, arsenic, and iron come back yet? On that site, what was this referring to, this email that Beth's,
17 Lawrence Street?
right?
Yeah,
What, where was the water tested? Town water tests, did they do it at the original wells that they normally do it at, the R5 well,
well, don't they
5
test for
wells, or?
those that are drinking wells? I think they test for those.
Right, I think that
There's what,
it doesn't
yearly-
say so in the email, but I
Is-
think that that's what it was referring
There's
to.
yearly testing that's
Right,
put out.
right, and I think they were waiting for that information to come back.
I mean, we got a water test
Right.
report.
But I don't
But
think
it
it
doesn't
included those
include-
parameters.
right.
I'm surprised it doesn't include arsenic. I thought it would. I thought it did. Almost positive it
I
included
don't know that much
arsenic.
about it, so.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what the reports look like, but they
But I
they
know
contain
that-
copper, they
right.
contain lead, zinc.
I probably have one out, I probably have one on the table as but I know that Rich has been working with the water division on getting those results.
Those results.
Mm-hmm.
Well, please do share them. And
Right,
Make
because
sure
I'm
whoever
not
gets
sure
them.
that those are things that are tested for on a regular basis, so I don't know if they had to do the testing and wait for the results.
well, you'd think that like once a year, they might do a broader scan.
Yeah,
I
I know
thought it
Rich
was
has
like
been
the entire-
working with Al Finney from the water division on that.
Yeah, I thought they had some pretty significant comprehensive testing when you get those results back. I thought they tested.
I'm not
for-
sure what DEP requires.
Could we, since the board is now a little more sensitive to these contaminants than we used to be, because
Mhm.
they keep popping up around town,
Mm-hmm.
it'd be really kind of good to know if, in fact, at least once a year or whenever, there is testing being done for these particular contaminants.
Right.
Like, when I
Those
see
guys-
chromium 6 arsenic, I'm
Yeah.
beginning to wonder, is it, wait a minute, is this buckwheat?
Those guys can answer that question. I cannot, but.
Right. Well, could you pass on our request?
Mm-hmm.
If they have a report, we'd love to see it.
Of course, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anything else? Unintended business? Is there a motion to adjourn?
There is motion to adjourn.
I second the motion.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Thank you.
This is.
So that was the only.